BlazBlue and Guilty Gear are fundamentally different. From aesthetics to gameplay, even the surface level similarities start to drift apart as soon as you delve deeper into each respective title. It's why, despite there being a shared audience of Air Dasher fanatics, each franchise has die-hard fans who will go to bat for their game. Although it's very easily debatable, to me, the most profound or at least most interesting difference between the two is the presence of attack attributes, or more specifically, strike attributes in BlazBlue. In this game, a move can have a head, a body, and a leg attribute. Although this is a simplification, as there are certainly exceptions, typically a jump attack has a head attribute, lows have leg, and your mids have body. Where this gets particularly interesting is when moves are invulnerable to certain attack properties. Let's look at Ragnar 6A. This move is invulnerable to attacks with the head property between frames 4 and 14, making it decisively an anti-air. When I say it's invulnerable to head attacks, I mean it's completely invulnerable. Even attacks that collide with his hurt box will go right through him, as you can see here signified with this white hit spark. It's worth noting, as I said before, it's only a certain portion of the move that's invulnerable, so you can be late or early when anti-airing, and you can also have it baited by various movement options. It's by no means a simplification of anti-airing. You can find this for foot moves as well, which are commonly lows or at least crouching attacks. Here Jin 6B is invulnerable to foot from frame 4 to 22, it will always go through. However, you hit him with something that's got a body property and he'll get clapped. A similar thing actually exists in modern Street Fighter. Shoryukens that may lack the invulnerability to grounded moves will sometimes specifically beat all air attacks. It's a form of balancing that is substantially more concrete than relying on your typical hit and hurt box interaction for an anti-air that can fail more frequently. Speaking of which, let's move on to Guilty Gear. This game functions more traditionally. Hitboxes and hurtboxes are the main thing that matter. Some moves do have invulnerability, but it's far less specific than the strike attribute system. This is found primarily in a character's reversals or supers. This is Kai's anti-air 6P. There is no specific move invulnerability, just upper body invulnerability. There is simply no hurtbox above his waist, so most jump-ins will whiff and he'll hit you. It's worth mentioning, to a slightly more limited extent, these anti-airs do exist in BlazBlue as well. Ragnar's 5B is a great anti-air in major part due to its speed and hitbox, no head invulnerability needed. Axel's 6H, it goes over lows just because the hurtbox is raised off the ground. However, if there's a low that hits particularly high up, such as Leo's 2D, it won't work. So we've talked about form, let's talk about function. What is so different about these styles of attacks, and why is it interesting? The comparison I make is the difference between Virtua Fighter's sidestepping system and Tekken's. Virtua Fighter has a binary success condition for sidestepping indicated by a noise when it works, whereas Tekken's sidestep system has far more variation depending on character size, sidestep length, and the attack you're trying to dodge. Maybe you sidestep most of a move but get caught by some weird active frame at the end. Virtua Fighter tries to prevent this. It's not an exact comparison, certainly, but the purpose of these invulnerable moves in BlazBlue is to help make decision making feel more absolute. It also gives the developer more room to carefully curate a character just due to the presence of more variables. One style is certainly not better than the other, but they can both pose interesting design challenges or solutions. Let's look at Guilty Gear Strive. One of the biggest complaints in the beta test was anti-airs are not working. So to fix this, they lowered the hurtbox on most of the cast 6Ps to around the knees. This worked. The thing is, 6P has always been an incredibly useful tool on the ground, and this game is no exception to that. You can use it to go through longer pokes with higher hitboxes as a counter. That's fine, this is a Guilty Gear strategy that has existed for a long time in a lot of versions. However, because it was buffed and the hurtbox went even lower, suddenly you can start using it against things like Kai's 2P. A dedicated anti-air going through crouching punches is at best visually confusing. It even works on things like Leo's sweep, which looks slightly more reasonable, but still not great. I don't think it breaks the balance or anything, but for spectators it is undeniably weird. It didn't even really solve all the issues people had. Pre the most recent patch, Chip's Jump 2K and Ram's Jump HS were really powerful jumping attacks because they hit so low under them it would basically bypass the 6P's upper body invulnerability. Once again, I do not think these moves break the game, but clearly Arxis didn't want them to serve this purpose, so both got nerfed pretty heavily. The addition of strike properties and invulnerabilities to them fix these kinds of issues. In BlazBlue you can have purpose-built anti-airs that do not hugely affect the ground game just by giving them head invulnerability. You can narrow your focus when balancing moves simply because there are more parameters to change, potentially avoiding unforeseen consequences. Ram's Jump HS specifically lost a lot of what made this move unique with the update, at least to a degree, as the hitbox no longer reaches as far down. However, once again, head invulnerability would have been a massive help to countering this move while retaining its identity, because you wouldn't have to worry about her tapping your hurtbox with the long vertical reach while anti-airing. You would still have to react super early to actually anti-air the move properly, but it wouldn't be as helpless of a situation when she's above you. Then again, is it an issue if you feel helpless when she's above you? One of the perks that solely hitbox based interactions have is the need for creative solutions. Maybe versus this move, instead you jump back then put out a button against her. Maybe you just backdash away, or maybe you don't get into this situation in the first place. It's fun discovering the utility of 6P in a grounded situation, even if it looks really wonky to an outsider. Seeing Tragic post on Twitter about how actually using close S is a really practical way of beating Chip's Jump 2K was exciting to me. It's a sort of knowledge that distinguishes players in the long run. Seeing the community come together to figure out problem moves is amazing. Not to say that BlazBlue doesn't have this, it of course does, but the obtuse nature of hitbox-hurtbox interactions being the sole thing a game is relying on certainly helps make some of this information less obvious. I do have to mention before both fanbases crucify me, I understand I have been reductive in the complexity of any given example during this video. There are so many variables in every situation. Even in something as simple as an anti-air in both games, it can be wildly hard to summarize. What I want to highlight is one of the huge differences between these two incredible franchises. Both approaches pose new problems and new solutions. This is the fundamental excitement that's found when experimenting with different mechanics, and why you as a player owe it to yourself to try different games. Fighting games are so rich in ideas, however, unfortunately, sometimes we look at balance or taste issues as systemic to the genre, but they really aren't. In my last video I talked about round start, and I liked that video, but a fair critique I got was, why are we worrying about this, it's just part of matchups. And that's true, it is part of matchups, but one of the amazing things about fighting games is how varied they can be in truly every aspect. It's a genre that's existed for 30 years now, so sometimes when the dialogue about a game's balance boils down to make this move worse or make this move better, I think it's unfortunate because there are so many mechanical solutions that we either ignore or dismiss due to a notion of legacy.